This video is going to be an introduction to strings. So let's talk about strings and let's talk about what they mean first. So string. A string is essentially a combination, a collection, I guess a combination would be a better word, of characters. They can be, for example, letters, they can be numbers, they can be other special characters like the ampersand. And keep in mind, this has to be between the double quotation, because if you use the ampersand outside of the double quotation, it means something else, which we will refer to when we talk about conditionals. But you can, the point is you can essentially combine characters and form a string. Now that might not make too much sense, but another intuitive way to think about a string is just thinking about a word. That's basically what a string is. If you think about hello world, this is a string. Why is it called a string? It's called a string because you're stringing together characters. That's what you're doing, right? You're stringing together characters. Now, let me give you some examples of strings to make sure you understand. So for example, string, now I'm going to be creating a variable of type string. The string variable is not a primitive data type. It's not primitive, and we'll be talking about what string is in a different video when we compare the different kinds of data types. But string is not a primitive data type. So it's a class, and we create objects of that class. So string s is equal to, and then whatever string that goes in here, you can leave it blank if you wanted to. You can just do like that. And then you can add on characters just whenever you want to, but that's a little bit more complex. You don't need to know about that now. You can add a number of characters in here. For example, and it can't be infinitely long in length, obviously, because there's memory there's memory restrictions, but to some memory degree, you can add many characters. So if I add, for example, hello world, and then exclamation, you can do this. This is a string. Another way to create the string would be to use the new keyword. This is something we'll cover when we talk about classes. It's basically going to call the constructor to create our object. And I'll call this something else because we already have s1, new string, and then hello world. We could have another string called hello world, but we just have to have a different variable name. That's why. Now that's just an introduction to string. Let me actually go over one more string, just so, because I realize I don't have any special characters here. So let me add another string. String s2 equals cs underscore 50, something like that. That was also a string. We'll talk about escape characters and how they can be used as well. But for now, like for example, if you wanted to add a backslash, how could you do that? You can't just add a backslash and call it good. Or what about if you wanted to add a double quotation within this? Wouldn't the computer get confused? It would, and that's why you need an escape character. And we'll talk about that in a different video. The final concept that we'll talk about is concatenation. This is not too hard, and so we're just going to cover it real quick. It's basically gluing together different strings. It doesn't have to be two strings. It just has to be a string and something else, like, for example, a number. That's also okay. So if I'm combining the two strings s and s1 into another, or all three of these, s1 and s2, into a string variable s3, I could just do string s3 equals s plus s1 plus s2. It looks like we're adding them together, but really we're not. This plus sign can be used for concatenation or for addition. Whenever we have strings involved, it's going to be for gluing them together, concatenation. Make sure that you know when we go hop over to the IDE, it'll be more apparent when we run our programs. But when you try to output this code, it's not gonna come very nice because the computer is not smart. the computer just follows directions. So the output, what it's going to be, this is our output. The output is going to be, so first we have S, which is hello world. And then it has S1. There's no space though. It's just going to be another hello world right after it. So it's just going to be another hello world. And these, fine, I'll just write it. It's hello world. There is a space in between the hello and the world. Okay. And then finally we have this. So there's no space here, but then what we do have is we have CS50 and there's an underscore in between the CS and the 50. And this is our program. This is what would output. This is our output. If we wanted a space, obviously in between these different words, we can do so by just adding a space in here, and we'll hop over to the IDE to demonstrate that now.
All right, so what Pranav alluded to earlier, a string is basically the words we see every day, right? So hello world, and they basically consist of sequences of letters. So the first thing we're going to demonstrate is creating a string variable. So how we do this is string, and the reason why string is actually capitalized is because, well, it's a class name, and by convention, all class names are capitalized. So the first thing we do, much like how we initialize our primitive variables, we have to first specify the type, so string, and we'll say S, and say, for example, we're going to say CS50 rocks in quotation marks. You have to make sure that we use double quotation marks for strings. So CS50 rocks. And another way we can actually create a string is through string S1 is equal to new string CS50 rocks. But we won't worry too much about this right now. The main thing we're going to be basically demonstrating is through a string literal, as that is easier to create and use. And now the next thing we're going to do is actually concatenate these two strings together. So we're going to create another string variable and say string S2. And how we do this is we use the plus. So S plus S1. And now we're going to print out the output of that. So when we do system.out.println and then do S2. And now if we run it in VS Code, we see some weird output that's going to be shown. We see that it's going to show CS50 rocks and CS50 rocks without actually a space between those two strings. So in order to account for that, we need to add an additional space between S and S1. So we do S plus, in quotation marks, we give a space. So S plus quotation marks, and then plus S1. So that is going to give us a space. And basically, when you print out these, Java is going to print out every space like literally. And we don't have the space at the end of the string S, and we don't have a space at the start of the S1. And so that's why it is critical that we also account for the spaces when you're trying to concatenate variables together. And so that's basically what we want to demonstrate within the IDE. Thanks.